Hello.
So, how you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good.
So, we have a an interesting one for you. This is going to be a little more data, a lot more secular. So, unfortunately, Nick was unable to join us. He is currently driving the great United States right now. Uh, no idea where he is other than that.
He's in
So,
Texas on his way west.
okay, okay. So, but today we want to talk a little bit about why everything is happening now. The reason, so like everyone knows that there's a collapse, and we all love talking about the collapse, and we all love complaining about the collapse, but no one's really asked the question, why now? It seems everyone just kind of accepts that it's going to be happening now and to just enjoy it.
Well,
But
not exactly. Dude,
okay.
most people are still clueless that the collapse is going to happen. Yeah, you've been talking about that for years, and it hasn't happened yet. And maybe it won't happen, so they don't worry about it. But smart people realize, yeah, something's going to happen eventually. Is it now? Yeah, soon, probably, but when? I don't know.
Well, I have my theories on when the collapse is going to happen. Um, I do believe there will be one, and I think we'll get into a little bit about why today. But it doesn't have to be tomorrow, y'all. Don't go buying zero
Holy
DTE
shit!
options.
I gotta find my lights here.
Uh-oh, we
That's
lost
a,
Steve. There we go.
no, that's not a perfect yet. I'll get there. Keep talking.
So I mean, don't go out buying 0-day options tomorrow. The market is not going to crash tomorrow. It's probably actually not going to do much of anything tomorrow, really, in the grand scheme of things. But in the future, there will be a massive reallocation of wealth, if nothing else. There will be enormous shifts. And the reason why those shifts must happen is also the same reason why the collapse is going to happen. Because whenever you shift money around, money gets lost. I hate to say that's an imprecise word, but when you give money to somebody else, they're going to do something different than what you would do with it. Is really what I'm trying to get at. So, but in order to really describe this story, we need to just define some terms. And as you may have guessed from our first stream, I love me some demographics. So while we're not going to get too deep into demographics today, I do need to correct a bit of a misconception that will then help explain why everything feels so extreme today. And pull this up. Boom. There we go. So many of you are familiar with the definition of boomer and Gen X. And the key point that I want to make today are the years in which these generations are defined. This is from a book called The Fourth Turning is Here by a fellow named Neil Howe. If you're familiar with the term boomer, Gen X, and millennial, he and a fellow who is no longer with us named William Strauss coined those terms. They invented them. So if you're using those terms, this is the guy who created them. So boomer, 1943 to 1960. Why 1943? Because the end of the World War II would be 2 years later, and a generation is kind of defined as 2 years before the end of an event or something similar to that. We'll get into it a little bit with the millennials here. Gen X, 61 to 81. You'll notice that we have a 17-year cycle, a 20-year cycle. And so then we're going to move on to the millennials, 82 to 2005. So now we've got a 23-year cycle. the book goes into the history of why the cycles are getting longer. If you want to read it, it's on Kindle. I'm using the Kindle version. All credit to Mr. Howe here. I love your work. Um, but what he called Homeland, you might know as Gen Z. And notice how he doesn't have an end date on Gen Z. And he goes into why later in the book, but throughout history, normal generation is about 24 years long. So if if you hear, oh, the Gen Z guys, they're done, we're moving on to Gen Alpha, I think is what they're calling this up and coming. No, those are still Gen Z in demographics. However, the marketers got a hold of this generational stuff and they started using it to sort of parse out their marketing generations at a finer level. So Gen Alpha is not a real generation, it's a marketing construct. And the reason I want to point all this out is because the data I'm going to show you does not follow the marketing generations that you might be used to. It follows this. Neil Howe is kind of considered the US expert of US generations. So the data we're going to look at follows his definitions, not the definitions that you are used to. So for the purposes of this conversation, mostly we're going to be looking at millennial and up. Unfortunately for us, Gen Z is not old enough to matter.
Well,
So-
and you and I had a conversation about, hey, if you're on the borderline between generations, mentally you kind of identify maybe with the previous generation, but you have some aspects of the following generation. So maybe you don't fit exactly where this says, but that's immaterial to this discussion because it's basically how the wealth is divided.
Correct.
If you don't fit, hey, this is somewhat soft science. It's you had to pick a date sometime, and this is how it's divided.
That's exactly correct. So, for example, if anyone's heard the term Zennial, as in Gen X and Millennial, those are millennials born within the first 4 years, roughly, of the millennial generation, and you can see how they can kind of identify a little bit with the Xers on some things. On other things, they look at the Xers with horror. So boomers and Xers, they have the same thing. A lot of early Xers, they identify a lot with boomers and they feel like they're part of that generation. That's okay. That's normal. This is mostly just these dates right now, they're soft, but the data that we're going to be looking at today is based on these dates. So just so we understand the background of where we are. So I'm just going to pull up this chart and this chart, frankly, when I first saw it, scared the shit out of me. And the reason for that is, well, let's take a look. This is the baby boom generation. And by the way, this is 156 trillion in US assets. So we're only dealing with the United States, but roughly speaking, there was a baby boom throughout the world. So these numbers are going to be similar if you're not in the United States. 50% of all assets in the United States are held by people who are older than the age of 60. Wild. 50% of all assets. There's a few categories you'd expect: durable goods, private businesses, real estate. Naturally, they own the most equities, mutual funds, that kind of stuff. We expect that. Other assets, they don't really describe what that is. It could be anything from cars, boats, all that kind of stuff. And then we get to Gen X. So they're the next down the list. That's another 29.5%. Well, okay. Round it up to 30 because makes the math easy. 80% of the wealth of the entire United States is held in two generations. One is the biggest generation in history, and one is the smallest. %80. Do I smell an imbalance somewhere in society? But it gets even better. We didn't even talk about the silent generation. The silent generation is the name of the generation before the boomers. For purposes of this chart, by the way, this data is about a year old. It's collected by the Federal Reserve from financial institutions, and it's a fairly coarse collection time frame. I think they only collect it quarterly, so it's old, but the relative proportions will not have changed too much. So the silent generation, they own another 12%, actually 11.9, and that's going to become important here in a second when I make a point. So really, people over the age of, we go back to our definitions here, people over the age of, 1981, do the math, that's over the age of 43, own 92%, or 91. We'll give them 91.
Yeah, but man, that silent generation, that would be people born prior to 1943.
Yes.
So yeah, they're like 80, over 80 years old.
Biden is a silent.
Yeah.
So yes, these are people over.
Those people are going to die pretty soon.
Indeed, they are. But note what they hold and note what they don't hold. They actually don't have, compared to the other two generations, they don't have a lot of real estate. They're actually more likely to hold stocks, and by in terms of percentages, if you look relative, 1.7 trillion in private business to 8 trillion, but they're 1/5 the size. They hold relatively more private business. They're much more likely to own other assets. So, like I was saying, cars and boats and
probably
other
bank
stuff
accounts would fall in there, wouldn't it?
I don't know. That could be under mutual funds, but you're right. It could be cash assets. The silent generation was notorious for being cash greedy because they grew up during the Great Depression.
Yep.
So absolutely, they could be cash heavy. So if y'all want to talk about an imbalance, this right here, to my reading of this data, is the root of the social problem, because you have, over the age of 43, you have 91% of assets. Now I mentioned this 11.9 is important because we need to come down here to millennials. Now, because of the way the data is collected, the Federal Reserve classifies all adults born after 1981. There's that date again. They're using the official definition. And because the Gen Zs only started graduating last year, they simply just don't have enough to show up on this chart. They are that 0.1% that would fill this out. So there's nowhere to put them on here. They have nothing. So for the purposes of this chart, the way they constructed it makes sense. And everyone wonders why the millennials and the Gen Z are looking at the world going, there's nothing here for me. Because there is nothing here for them. Well, that's not entirely true. Yeah. Okay. Yes. This actually needs to be brought up. And those two generations will crap on millennials when millennials say anything. Yes, they will. There was actually a tweet a couple months back where a boomer gets on Twitter and says, well, I have a perfect response for the okay boomer trend. And he said, and it's okay renter. The boomers are the most socially awkward generation we have. And that tweet lit off a firestorm in the comments. Like the millennials were not happy about this. But this is exactly why. The millennials really are a renting generation. You say, oh, but they own so much real estate compared to, their relative size. And they do. They own it all with a mortgage, though. So they don't really own it. They're renting it from a bank. And guess what? The bank that's renting to them sits right here. All those equities, mutual funds, all those private businesses.
Yeah, a certain amount of pension money might be invested in real estate as
yes.
well.
A lot, actually.
Not a lot in treasuries, but yeah, okay. They're a bit diversified.
They're not as diversified as you could be.
Yeah, exactly.
They actually struggle to find markets deep enough to diversify like a small person can. So
damn, it's hard to place that amount of money.
$16 trillion is hard to place. There's not a lot of markets that can absorb that. So the millennials own 5 trillion on paper. Really? The baby boomers own that too. So when the millennials talk about, how they're, things are not going well for them, it's right here in the data. When a boomer comes to you and says, in my day, we had to walk to school up ways and both hills, just suck it up, millennial. They're wrong, like factually incorrect. And so you can you can respond however you want. Just when you do respond negatively, just understand that you are in fact by data correct. So here's another fun fact. If you had looked at this chart in the late 1920s, it'd look awful familiar. Now, the data back then was not as finely parsed out as we have now, but there is an interesting sort of cycle to demographics, and most of the book I mentioned actually talks about that cycle. We won't get into it today, but my point in saying that is to understand that we've been here before, we've done this before, and that the responses that we're seeing of the various generations are nothing new. They lead to some uncomfortable places. So like when we talk about the collapse, like this is why I say I'm reasonably sure a collapse is coming, because we're making the same mistakes we made in the 1920s. So, and we can, what was really popular in the 1920s? The alphabet people. They didn't call them the alphabet people back then.
What, Skittles, you mean?
Yeah, Skittles, yeah.
Okay.
That was very popular back in the 20s.
Well, there was some stories of that in Germany prior to the man with the small mustache. And yeah, well, that was a lot of abortion and birth control were getting popular. The flappers, there was kind of an open sexual attitude of anything goes.
There's a reason for that, and it ties back into this chart. And we're getting there. There is a path that I'm trying to take people down today. So this isn't a stream you can just pop in and out of. We very definitely have a direction we're trying to go. But that generation would have told you many of the same things that millennials are saying now. They don't feel like there's any way for them to get ahead. They feel like there's, like the older people own everything, and they just can't get anywhere. So,
hey, can I point out something? You keep talking about the collapse. For those of you who don't believe in the collapse, just think of it as a transitional crisis. Same damn thing.
Exactly. Exactly. That is exactly what this is. You cannot take this much money and move it efficiently. It's simply not possible. We're it's 156 trillion, and you want to try and move 140 trillion of that in the span of 10 years. Good luck. Can't
Now,
be
what's
done.
the GDP of the U.S. per year now?
GDP of
16?
the US, no, it's 20.
20.
Yeah, it's 2022.
Okay. Well, it's in that range. And a lot of that is government spending. So what's the real productive capacity? Well, okay. We could get in a big debate of this. But this is several years of the entire productive output of the U.S. that needs to change ownership.
So for 2020, so for 2023, which is the last data we have, it's 27 trillion.
Wow.
So you're looking at about, so you're looking at about 5 years, roughly. No,
That's kind of an apple and oranges comparison, though.
it is, but it helps. It does help explain the gravity and just the monstrous of the situation that we're facing. The
Right.
entire economic production of the biggest economy on the planet for 6 years. This is not going to go smoothly. It can't go smoothly. No other way to say it. To move this much money between generations is probably a 25-year project. And it has to move in 10 minimum, at maximum. You were going to say something, Steve?
No, I was just thinking. If I could come up with a way to siphon off 1/10,000th of a percent of this transfer, I think I could be a happy man. But, my principles, if I could, live with my conscience. But, is there a temptation to siphon off some of this or make it not go well? And, maybe you'll touch on that.
Oh, well, I mean, there absolutely is. Oh, my goodness. Because there is no way to move this amount of money this quickly enough, not only is that siphoning going to happen, it's going to be the most inefficient redirection of wealth that has ever happened in human history. And that inefficiency is going to cause all sorts of problems. But then we have the problem of, what do we do once we get what remains to the people who are going to take it into the future? And this is where things get really scary. Like, there's a reason I say that a collapse is coming, and it's, believe it or not, it's this number right here plus this number right here. Add the Gen X and baby boom real estate numbers together. For those keeping score at home, that would be 31.9 trillion dollars of real estate.
Compared, well, you're just adding the Gen X and the boomers. You better add in the
right, the silence too, with their 4.8. So
36 trillion.
Yeah, $36 trillion of real estate.
36 trillion has to move. And where's it going to go? Well, there's only one place on this pie chart for it to go, to the millennials. And they only have 5 trillion now. So that amount, man, that pie chart needs to move down there. Oh, wow. How's that even possible? I mean, talk about disruptive.
It's not possible. That's the answer. It's not possible. And the reason is the millennials simply don't have the assets to, if you add up everything the millennials have, I'd have to sit here and actually
Well,
parse
you
out the numbers.
do. It's down on the
Oh,
pie.
13 trillion.
They have
Okay.
13 trillion.
It's a little over a third of just the real estate market. Every asset the millennials have is a skosh over a third of what the other generations own in real estate. It ain't happening, folks. But there is an inefficiency you can exploit. And that's a little thing called deflation. The millennials can absorb that housing if prices come down a lot. Or there's another inefficiency you can exploit. Wage inflation. Pay the millennials so much more that they can afford to absorb these houses.
Yeah, is that going to happen?
I had a fascinating conversation with a business owner in the tech space recently, and I asked him, so because I brought up this I didn't have the chart in front of me, but I brought up the numbers, and I asked him, so are you going to quadruple the pay of your staff? And he went, oh God, no, I could never afford to do that.
Right.
But that's what has to happen to make this work.
Right.
And quadrupling the income of the millennials probably isn't even enough. Looking at this chart, you probably have to 10x it. So if they're making 100,000, you got to pay them $1 million. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Let's just be realistic.
Am I far off to say that deflation has to be of the similar order of magnitude?
Correct.
So drop from a house is 100,000, it has to drop to 25,000 or less. Okay, we're not talking scientific numbers here. This is economics, but it has to drop dramatically for that transfer to happen. Is that
correct?
Am I seeing it right?
You are correct. And there is a way to do this. And believe it or not, Senator Warren is right now drafting the legislation that'll do it. It is estimated that large institutional investment houses own a significant portion of the U.S. residential real estate market. They're actually more into commercial, and they are taking an absolute bath right now. It's kind of fun to watch. Yeah. Watching BlackRock just take massive loss after massive loss every quarter on its commercial real estate is fun. They're being held up by residential real estate primarily. Commercial real estate market has a higher valuation number because towers are more expensive than single family homes. However, the legislation that Senator Warren is drafting would prohibit institutional investors from holding over a certain number of properties. Now, obviously, this legislation is still being written. It's not even in committee, and so the numbers could change at a moment's notice. So that's why I'm not giving you any. When I last read, the number was 50. That could change if it becomes apparent that it needs to change for whatever reason. And the legal basis for doing this is antitrust law.
So the number of properties it could hold is 50?
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't matter if the number is 500 or 5,000. It's still trivial.
Compared to the number they hold right now? Absolutely.
Yeah. Or compared to what has to transfer. I don't care about that number. It's trivial.
Well, here's what this law would require. This law would require them to sell all properties over the threshold.
I understand that.
basic economics, supply and demand. What happens if you wake up and they have 120 days, I think, to sell all the properties. So they have a
Wow.
yeah.
Generous.
So I know, right? So what would happen if 10 million units of housing came on the markets tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, I would buy one, but if I don't have the cash, I got to go to a bank and get a loan. That would be a huge burden on the banks to make those loans. Is the system able to create that many loans, basically create that much money
No.
in such a short period of time? Therefore, since they can't, it would kind of come down to we need to sell. It's got to be mostly cash, and therefore, who has the cash to buy that many? And the price would be less than 10% of what it is now.
Bingo.
Oh, man, my thinking was right.
You want to talk about a collapse? Watch what happens to boomers when their housing prices crater by 90%.
I'm being optimistic that it's only 90%.
I am too.
But, give or take, it doesn't matter.
So I just saw another number recently that I don't have a chart for it because it's just a number. But since 1980, house prices are up 500%. At no other time in human history has housing prices moved like that. We are still in a housing bubble.
As a side note, I bought my first house in 1986. I was a new mechanical engineer. I made $30,000 a year. That was a high wage. I bought my first house. It was a duplex in Duluth, Minnesota, made of brick, built in, 1913. I paid $30,000 for that. One time my salary. I mean, that's just, doesn't that boggle your mind compared to what people have to pay now?
Same house probably sells for what, 600,000?
No, it's Duluth. It's probably sells for $250. It's not in a great area of town.
Oh, okay, okay.
But it's you couldn't do that now.
Nope. You can't do it now. So we have, and the point I want to make here is that this valuation, 18.3, these are based on current housing prices. So if the housing market collapses, these numbers go down with it. And so the pie shifts around. And of course, as we know from 2008, if the housing market collapse, equities and mutual funds are going to go with them. We already know that. So this chunk, and this chunk. So really it's these two chunks will all collapse. Interestingly enough, if the money pool gets much, much smaller, it actually gets a little easier to transfer things. And the reason why is what we just discussed. If I have to drop my price 90% to clear my inventory, you're going to find a bunch of people who all of a sudden can. And this is how markets are supposed to work. Price goes up when demand goes up, and price goes down to find the pool of buyers that can meet the selling demands. This is basic market theory, and we've kind of lost sight of that. So here it is for you guys.
So as an individual, if there was a place for me to move my wealth, and it's liquid and it maintains its value to ride out the storm, then I could watch equities fall and real estate fall by, let's say, 80, 90%. But if what my wealth didn't fall, I could basically come in and buy it and have those assets transfer more into me than into other people.
You could.
But where do I store my money so it doesn't? Where do I store my wealth?
In this particular in this particular scenario of a massive deflation, treasury bonds do the best out of everything, with the exception of cash, just cold hard cash in a bank.
Cash, but you have to make sure that the bank doesn't fail. Or if the
Correct.
bank fails, yeah, okay, if FDIC can that insure it? I don't know.
Which is why if you have more than $250,000 of cash, and a lot of people do this. So this is not financial advice. I'm just telling you what I've seen other people do with large piles of cash. Is they go out and buy treasuries with it, because the treasury is not with the bank. It's with, it's basically with the federal government. And
and theoretically, you could put the portion in gold and silver. What's that going to do? I don't know.
It should sit there and do nothing. If gold is in a crash, gold should not go up, but it shouldn't go down much either.
So you could probably preserve your wealth and some of your wealth in precious metals. Again, not financial advice. It's just speculative thinking.
Absolutely. So those are things that you could do if you want to do this. It is, and one of the oldest axioms of markets is it's always good to be liquid at the bottom, because the person who's liquid at the bottom is buying, and they're going to set up generational wealth for themselves.
Well, wait a minute. There's that other adage: buy when there's blood in the streets.
Yep.
Could there be, metaphorically, blood in the streets during this transition? Metaphorically.
Metaphorically, yes. Although I will say in 2008, there was more than one self-deletion that occurred on Wall Street.
Absolutely. Happened in the 29.
Absolutely.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Quite a bit. So yes, that is also a saying that matters here. But once this pie gets smaller, it gets easier to transfer that wealth. And I think I look at it and I go, I'm not sure we can inflate our way out of this mess. It's too top heavy. You're talking about having to 10x a millennial's salary, basically make them overnight millionaires. And what would real estate do if you did that? Real estate would just go up even more, because it's getting hit by inflation. Deflationary cycles are part of normal market functioning throughout history. 1929, you have the South Sea and the whole stock market bubble back in that was Isaac Newton got caught in that one. Of course, you have tulips, the Dutch. Any market of sufficient size where you're not trading hard goods, right? I'm not trading you my wheat for your apples, is going to have something like this. And deflationary cycles are just something that you have to learn to accept. And this is why this chart is why you have deflationary cycles. Because if you take this 18.3 and turn it into 1.83, well, the millennials who don't have much, they'll get hit, but they're not going to get hit that hard. Yeah, the real estate will get smaller because they're all levered to the hair tips on debt, but for that real estate, but the rest of it probably do okay.
Well, plus I'd make the observation that our federal debt and the obligations are humongous, and our deficit keeps going up, and we just have to print money to have enough money to just keep the system going. And it's really, in some, you could argue it is unsustainable. So with this great wealth transfer has to happen, isn't it an opportune moment to reimagine the US dollar? It's happened before. What we had 1945 was Bretton Woods. And
It
then
is.
1971 was we went, we took silver out of the coinage, and now every bill you use is a Federal Reserve note. It's not a Federal Reserve certificate. So at some point, you got to kind of reinvent our basis for our monetary system, or the US dollar.
It is. And believe it or not, some people are talking about what that might look like, but it's not time yet. We're not there yet. So this kind of goes down.
That will have to happen at some point.
Yes, it will. What you're actually talking about is a piece of a thesis by a guy named Brent Johnson, who's the CEO of Santiago Capital. And this is what he calls his dollar milkshake theory. His theory is a global theory, a thesis, but reimagining the dollar is part of what comes out of that. I'm not going to get into that. That's for a totally different stream. Just so you guys know out there that there are people talking about it and who are aware of exactly what Steve brought up.
So you don't think that this wealth transfer will be simultaneous with a dollar reimagining?
I don't think we'll have a choice but for it to be simultaneous.
Okay.
We're just not quite here yet. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the demographic chart here, the millennials or the boomers are here. They're starting to slowly die off, but the average age in the United States is 79.
With the average age of what? The
average lifespan. The average lifespan of a U.S. citizen is 79. So
yeah, you didn't say that right the first time. That's why.
Yeah, you got me. So starting this year, the boomers reach that average lifespan in large numbers and they start dying. So this wealth transfer is coming no matter what. This is not something we can avoid, but the worst of it isn't here yet. The worst of it hits probably 8 years from now. There's a reason for that. The bulk of the baby boom happened early in the boom because coming home from the war, guys got married, had lots of kids. So on a just if you were to parcel out the boomers into quartiles, the first two quartiles had more kids than the last two.
What are you putting on your actuarial hat now?
I may have a thing for data. But I find that working with data tends to it allows us to set aside a lot of our emotions about what we want to have happen or what we think should happen. And you can have a reasonable conversation about what's actually going to happen. Because the one thing I can guarantee is that people are going to die. What death and taxes are the only two absolutes. So this does leave us for the next few years in a bit of an annoying place because they're not dying yet. We're not there yet. And so what you have is a generation with very little in the way of tangible assets, with salaries that do not allow them to collect more assets, that they certainly aren't going to be going over here and buying up the baby boomers' real estate as they're dying.
No,
so, and everyone says, oh, well, I'll just give my houses to my kids. They say that's what they're going to do, but they don't actually do that. Reverse mortgages are probably one of the most popular instruments right now for banks. The banks are literally buying back houses from you, and you get a monthly paycheck from the bank to do it. Now, that's not all boomers can do that, because boomers are carrying, when they retire at 65, they have the highest percentage of the boomers carrying their mortgage into retirement of any generation in US history. I know boomers with 20 years left on their 30-year mortgage at 65. So kind of hard to do a reverse mortgage when you're still paying back your
Yeah,
original mortgage.
there's another factor here. When you move into assisted care or retirement, nursing home, whatever, that's going to cost you 10. Well, before you're, just assisted living low, it's going to be like $4 to $5 a month.
Mhm.
Get up to more care, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 per month. So all this wealth that you have in your house and your assets just gets siphoned off to prepare or to pay for your care in old age. And those are assets that are not transferred. And
That's correct.
there's a big sucking sound of the wealth in the last 5 years, 3 years. It's just wow. It goes.
Absolutely. Steve has yet again nailed yet another reason why the millennials are going to struggle to pick up the assets. They're not actually going to go to you. They're going to go towards, and here's the thing. Millennials are broadly okay with that, not getting the houses. For the most part, the millennials would just be trying to sell the houses. So let's say you get a house from your parents. Most of them would be trying to sell the house just to pay off their mortgage anyway. So the millennials don't need their parents' last house. They would just try and sell it. So regardless of who's doing the selling, the house is getting sold. It could be sold via reverse mortgage to pay for the last years. The millennials are okay with that because they can't afford to pay for it themselves. Harsh reality is what it is. So this idea that, oh, we're just going to give all these assets to our children is absolute hokum, but it is a fantasy that is told to try to placate the millennials while the boomers control. So the boomers control the vote right now. They control the money, they control the vote. There's just so many of them. Starting in 2028, they will no longer control the vote. They're going to have to work together with somebody, probably the Xers. And we'll see if that works, because the millennials are huge and the Xers don't really like the boomers that much. So, but this just,
a friend of mine keeps saying, complaining about he's doing okay actually, but everything keeps going up, and I might not be able to make my house payment, and I might be living in a cardboard box on the street if I can't afford my house. He's the same age as me. I think, what the hell kind of a doomer kind of thinking is this? Because if it gets that bad, who the fuck are you going to sell your house to? And who the hell is going to live in your house? And we're going to have, if that happens, we're going to have all these vacant houses. So who the fuck is going to live in all these vacant houses? You might as well just stay in your house and live there. And because somebody has to occupy all this property. Because if you don't occupy it, it just, then it's worth nothing.
Absolutely.
So, this gloom and doom that, the transfer is not going to happen. No, it will happen. It'll go someplace. Hey,
one way or another.
Maybe you will own nothing and you will be happy, because you're going to still be living in it, but you're going to be paying someone else.
Well, I could argue that we're already doing that. with the way rents are. Now,
kind of.
What's interesting about that is, yes, but also like if this law does pass, the answer would be actually it would make it really hard for them to pull that off. So
Right.
there's this idea that the here's how I think of the Davos crowd. They are straight down the line IQ, middle of the road. They have 100-point IQs, but because they're wealthy, they think that they have 160-point IQs. And so they walk around telling themselves, oh, this is going to work. This is going to work. And then when it doesn't, they are just flabbergasted because they're so smart. How could they not see it coming that it wasn't going to work? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if BlackRock can't hold all these properties by law because of a populist uprising that basically demands that they can't, by the way, there's actually historical precedent for this. In the 1930s, the bank would, so Lord Venom here, he's saying, oh, it's going to get taken by BlackRock and Vanguard. Well, yes, it would. And in the 1930s, this happened to farms in the Midwest all the time.
Yes.
And well, here's what happened. So the bank would come to the town center. They would put up the properties for auction, and the entire town would show up, and they'd show up with long range hole punchers.
Yeah, those were called sheriff's auctions.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
the reason for showing up with the long range hole punchers was very simple. Only one person was allowed to bid.
Can I guess who that is?
The prior owner.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to guess that.
I had to steal your thunder on this one.
That's fine.
So only the prior owner was allowed to bid. And so the prior owner could bid pennies, and they would just bid whatever they had in cash. Okay. And that's where the term penny auction comes from, because they could buy their own property back, pennies on the dollar, and there was absolutely nothing the banks could do about it because no one else would bid. And there were implements to make sure that no one else bid. And I don't know what that would look like in modern terms, because we get so caught up on the implementation details of how the stuff works. Make no mistake, something like that will happen. Doesn't have to involve long range hole punchers, but it could be a series of laws that get passed that say, yeah, BlackRock, you just can't hold all that, so you've got to get rid of it all. And now BlackRock goes, okay, pennies on the dollar. You know what?
So you were talking about the Davos crowd. What is that quote? The best laid plans of mice and men. And I know what it means, but it means they do all this scheming. No matter how much you scheme, often it doesn't work out that way. Just like a stock is not worth what it is, and you're going to short it. Yeah, right. You might be right, but your timing is wrong and you lose everything. And these folks are no smarter than anybody else.
They are actually very average IQ.
More prideful, more full of themselves. They think they got it all under control, but probably not.
Well, yes. And so those penny auctions are part of a larger problem that we see right now. Is you have a very large generation. The millennials are the second largest generation in US history, just in raw in nominal terms. But they have no assets, they have no money. So what do they do with what little cash they have? Well, they gamble. Because if they lose it all, it's not that big a hit to them. They can afford to gamble, and so they do. And I am not just talking about casinos here. There is a reason why this real estate number is so much larger than the rest of these numbers down here. When you buy a house on a 5% with 5% or less down, you are taking 20-to-1 leverage I'm sorry, the casino has better odds. It like go play blackjack, you'll get better odds. Okay. The so you see all these millennials out there with the hustle culture, and we got to buy housing, and we got to get all the, and they lever up too. They will get loans to get the down payment, to get the loans, to buy the houses. It's all of that. There's a reason why they're doing it, because they're young enough that they have time to recover, and their situation is so bad that they have nothing to lose. And they're looking at the world going, well, I got nothing to lose. My situation's shit. So what if I'm gambling? So
Well,
what?
as long as they can make the payments, who the fuck cares if it doesn't work out? They can make the payments and I can live here as long as I can make the payments. I'd have to be renting otherwise. Who cares if I lose it?
Right. Who
That's
cares?
kind of gambling.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, yes, casinos have seen record profits over the past 10 years. That is also true. They are also going to casinos. I have one up in my area that I drive past. I use that as kind of my how's the economy doing check. The casino parking lots are still very full, have been for the past 2 years in particular, but for the past 10 years. So when you have nothing to lose, why not gamble? The other lotto, you've probably heard about all the record lottery numbers, that payouts that have been happening. Well, lottery payouts come from people buying tickets. So the record lotto payouts are just a function of all the people gambling in the lotto, because, hey, it costs you, I don't know what a lottery ticket costs now, but probably the same as a Starbucks. And there's a small chance that you might make a lot of money.
Well, for the big lotteries, like when it's $1 billion, which happens a couple times a year, 2-3 times a year, and maybe one of those times I'll buy a lottery ticket, or 2 or 3. Each chance costs you $2 to $3.
Okay.
So you know what? I buy it, and I have that dream because I know I'm not going to win. But you know what? I'm buying a dream that lasts for about 3-4 days. That's all I'm buying.
Look, I am not saying that any of this is bad. Or like, what I'm trying to say really is, I understand. I understand where the millennials are coming from. I do.
Yeah.
Look at this.
When you got nothing to lose, you'll play the long shot.
Yeah, I would. I do. I have two computer monitors right now that are currently showing 5 different charts of different asset classes. By the way, guys, stocks are gambling. Ironically, stocks. So in terms of gambling, here's my thing. Real estate is the biggest gamble ever. Highest leverage gamble you can take. Most likely to ruin you as well. The next biggest gamble is the casino. So in the casino, the odds are against you mathematically. We can prove that. With stock market, there is no house. So there are ways that you can do things that are not gambling in a strict, in a sense of the risk is permanently against you, like they are at a casino or in real estate. So because the stock market has no quote unquote house, that is the stock market's, if you want to go the gambling route, they're most like poker. So in poker, the casino does not make money on its odds against you. They have what's called a rake, where you have to pay them a tithe every orbit, and that's how they make their money. So that's kind of how the stock market is. It functions in the same way. You have to pay a fee to execute a trade. That's how they do it there. The odds of a particular stock doing a particular thing are neither for or against you. So that's just like that's my hierarchy of gambling. Real estate at the top. That is the worst gamble you can make, particularly if you're doing it on a high leverage, low down, no down loan. Those are the worst kind of bets to take. Then you get into the casinos, and then you get into stocks. So that's kind of how I see it, just on the basis of the actuarial tables in terms of your odds. But you also see, so those are kind of the gambling forms, but there's another strain that pops up. And again, if you look back at particularly the 1920s, you saw very similar things. They didn't call it this, but you saw very similar things in the church with to what we call today prosperity gospel. This idea that you can just manifest or will into your life prosperity out of nothing. Very, very common in the 1920s as well to see this sort of behavior. So, I mean, to me, it's no surprise that the prosperity churches are overflowing. These are people who are desperate. So, if this is one of those things where I look at it, and the reason that we spent so much time on this chart is all of your social ills have their roots in this chart. Why is the prosperity gospel church expanding and the regular church dying? Well, we can talk about all the things the church isn't doing, and particularly with relation to men, and those are all true. But the reason the prosperity gospel churches are doing so well compared is this chart. Why are the casinos doing?
Just saying, people want hope.
Yes, it is.
They hope. You can't get it by hard work. It seems like there's no way forward, except I just hope that I'm prosper. God blesses me. I manifested manna from heaven.
Mm-hmm.
It's that wishful thinking.
Exactly. And it's because they cannot get ahead through the labor of their hands and their mind that it is very easy to tell yourself, well, I can't get ahead where I am right now, but there's a chance. It doesn't matter how small that chance is, that if I gamble a little bit, I can make a lot, and then it'll all be okay.
So what's your next point here? I'm following your outline, and I think I can zip through my additions probably in 15 minutes.
Well, my point is that just like the 1920s, this ends in a very predictable way. The collapse is coming, and that collapse is going to rewrite large chunks of our society. I call this the bust, because if we're going to live in a gambling culture, I'm going to use gambling terms. Damn it. So, I mean, my view of the stock, I get ridiculed for my personal views on what's going to happen to the stock market over the next 6 to 10 years. People think I'm absolutely insane. They'll tell me that can never happen, that inflation is the only answer, despite history saying otherwise. All of that. I'm not going to get into that. This is not a financial advice show, although we will talk money and I think I've made my case here that this finance stuff is a core component to what's going on. So, yes, there is a collapse or a bust coming. No, it will not be the end of the world, at least in the United States. If you live in China, yeah, it will actually be the end of the world. If you live in Africa, sorry, it's going to be the end of the world for you too. Europe, you're not going to enjoy this, but you'll be given a stay of execution because you're friends with the United States. The friends and family plan matters quite a bit here to how this is going to play out. But one of the things,
Okay.
one of the things that Neil Howe talks about at length in his book is how these major shifts rewrite the rules of society. And that's not the purpose of this stream. You know, what comes after the collapse. We can talk about that, but not today. But understand that the rules that you're used to will be completely rewritten. The social contract will be completely rewritten. The economic contract completely rewritten. So you were talking about the dollar earlier. Reimagine the dollar. I assume that's going to happen. I assume it. So that to me is what this speaks to.
Well, okay, now let's give some hope to the millennials. Now let me talk about some of the things that they're feeling and maybe some of the reasons that they gamble and feel a little bit hopeless. Marriage rates are going down. So men not married are not motivated.
Yep.
There's no children. Men without children are not motivated, or they're divorced and, you know, the wife is gone, the children, she took the children, they're not motivated. We are kind of isolated. We don't have community involvement. And they didn't grow up in an intact family. And all these things combined to be kind of a lack of purpose. And how the hell am I going to navigate this and make money, buy property? Well, why do I even care to own a house if I don't have a wife and kids? So those are all factors. Houses are so damn expensive. That's the inflation. I can't even afford it. Well, okay. And then they got the debt because they went to college, got college loans, and they're still paying those off.
Mm-hmm.
They're owned by somebody else in here. They got credit card because, hey, buy it now, enjoy it, because who the hell cares? I can't pay for it, but I can enjoy it now.
Yep.
Then autos are so damn expensive. I mean, when I was a young man, hey, a 36-month loan, that was standard. Now you go buy a new car, you're talking a 72 to 84-month loan. Okay,
they're starting to introduce 10-year loans now, by the way.
And okay, so that means they got no disposable income.
Yep.
And then on top of that, okay, now this is not about millennials. Well, both. There's kind of a loss of Christian understanding in two areas. There's no understanding of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
How suffering has value, but suffering also is very close to delayed gratification. If I save money, then I'll have money to buy something of value. I suffer or delay my gratification. But again, in a high inflation, what I save gets inflated away, so it doesn't have the value, and houses are going up faster than my rate of savings can do it. So that's kind of hopelessness.
Yep.
And you touched on this earlier. Stewardship. Well, kind of, you touched on it. The baby boomers are not really focused on how they're going to pass down their assets. So the boomers and the silent generation in throughout history, old people were old men thought about stewardship. This isn't my land. This is the family land.
Yes.
I pass the family land. I'm the steward. Okay, I'm the owner on paper, but I'm steward of this land. And I pass it on to my son, and he passes it on to his son. It's a stewardship. And, you know, I just saw that evaporate, just gone, of the people who are older than me. They lost that sense of stewardship.
Well,
So these are all factors in that are going, sociological factors that are going to play themselves out here.
so Stephen, I want to add something to the stewardship angle because I think it's something that we're seeing and we're not really fully calling it out.
Okay.
And again, we kind of touched on it. It's yes, you might have a piece of property that you intend to pass on to your children, but is that a piece of property that they can use? Is it something that they could sell easily? Is it something that you're going to turn into a reverse mortgage and hand over to a bank? Right? They're not, stewardship requires a sort of forward thinking that I have not seen in my lifetime.
Well, yeah, it would have to be unencumbered property.
Right,
If
right,
you encumber
exactly.
the property, it's really not stewardship.
Right, exactly. So it's like, okay, yes, I get it, Mr. Boomer. You still have 20 years left on your mortgage and you're going to ride that mortgage till the day you die. Great. Thanks. I'm just going to hand it back to the bank and I get nothing. So it's like, you didn't actually take care of this. And you're telling me, oh, well, I'll just pass it on to you. No, that's a lie that you're telling yourself to make yourself feel good about the bad decision you made. And that bad decision is how we end up with this unsustainable mess that is going to get rammed through an inefficient system and is going to destroy millions of people in the process.
So, okay, we know this wealth transfer is going to happen. We know the millennials are disadvantaged from an asset standpoint at this point. And they have a bunch of things that I just went through, their current debt levels and all that. And although we're not giving financial advice, let's speculate on what a smart millennial could do to prepare for this to come out better than he is now. Let's just put it that way.
Well, there is one thing I want to say. In the finance world, we call renting a synthetic short on housing. So if you're renting, you're short a house, which means that if you rent, you benefit from falling prices. So, and we see this, the financial term for this is reflexivity. The millennials have been forced into a situation where they are now doing the right thing. They don't have another choice. But the millennials are, as a generation, we are speaking broadly here, synthetically short housing. That's good for them. Because as the housing prices collapse, they won't have... The reason we say that is because houses are bought on a mortgage, and if you get smacked with a mortgage that you have to go into bankruptcy, you can't buy a house on a mortgage. But if you're renting and a sweet deal comes up for 10% of the price, you can probably get that mortgage, and so you go get it and you buy it. You won't always be able to get the mortgage.
If they had $5,000 in a bank account, they would
didn't touch it,
be immensely better off than a person that had $0 in the bank account. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
And it could be so amazing. This collapse could be so significant that $5,000 in a bank account could make a huge difference.
The math says it's possible. Now, there are confounding factors, and we will have to see how various laws and stuff go. So yeah, that's why this isn't financial advice. But
that's why it's speculation,
yes.
Speculative thinking. But they'll not be any worse off.
Oh no, you would not be worse off
in a bank account.
Well, because here's the, there's a corollary
accumulating a couple $1,000s worth of silver or gold. Yeah, okay, you you're not going to lose all your money. It's not really a gamble. It might go up, it might go down a little bit. It's probably not going to be a home run.
You don't need it to be a home run.
But just preserving and having, the more, I guess what we're speculating is just reduce your debt level and have liquid assets.
Really, that's what this comes down to. Particularly the debt levels, because in deflations, the benefit switches to people who do not have debt. So the more debt you have, the more screwed you are, because the only way out of that debt is bankruptcy. Now, most people don't understand this, but bankruptcy is deflation. And we're going to have a lot of deflation just through bankruptcy. The reason for that being is that in deflation, the money is not repaid. It is destroyed. The money that was created via the loans is just destroyed. It says, nope, that money doesn't exist anymore. That's literally what it means. So just, it's kind of a hashtag deal with it because it's done by court order. So the basic idea being that if you create money, then the act of, because remember, the bank's not getting that money back now in a bankruptcy. So they either have to cover it or write it off. Well, the currency that was going to be used to pay you back is no longer going to come in. So it just ceases to, the loan just ceases to exist. Therefore, the money that was created by the loan also ceases to exist. Is the quickest way to explain that. So,
well, I would also say that in this transition, there can be, and property values go down, a lot of bank balance sheets are going to be totally fucked. And it's possible that banks will be closed and they'll have to figure out, okay, how are we going to pay the depositors?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And your money may be frozen for a while.
And you'll only ever get $250,000 of it back. That's the max you can get back.
A millennial, $250,000.
That's true. That's true. They don't have that much.
He's got, 10 grand in the bank. You know what? Until things are sorted out, it's not such a bad idea to have a couple $1,000s in cash.
You mean actual physical currency units that I can hold?
I'm speculating that. yeah, exactly.
So I'm not as big into gold as I am into. We lost him. So I'm not as big into gold as I am brass. Those of you that know, you understand. Steve's clicking buttons again.
Yeah, I bumped it. Okay.
So I was just saying that I'm not as big into gold as I am into brass, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink.
Oh.
But so that's my preferred commodity of choice, shall we say? But I also do keep physical currency units on hand. Like there's guys, and by the way, I am a millennial. I'm actually the same age as Nick for all you Nick people watching from Nick's channel. But you can do this. It's possible. It's very hard work. You are not going to live a fun life. I hate to sound like Dave Ramsey, but guys, we have to get our financial lives in order. I can't tell you exactly when this is coming. I can tell you that when it does come, it's not going to be over quickly. This chart is exactly why. That's why I brought it up. This isn't something that the Federal Reserve can just say, oh, well, we're going to do this and this will make it all okay, like they did after 2008. Nope. I'm not saying the Federal Reserve won't act. I think we all know that they will. What I'm saying is that whatever it is they do will be insufficient to this.
Okay.
To this
now
problem.
Let me give you a little bit of advice. This is actual advice. immaterial of anything we said here. If a man has $500 in cash and is stuck in a hidey hole in his wallet, and maybe access to 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 in cash that his wife does not know about.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's his mad money. And then he just goes about his daily life. There will be times when some other man needs to sell something and he needs money in a hurry. He's going through a divorce or something, or this gun comes up and damn, I just need the money and, I'm going to sell it. And if you are the guy who has that cash money, you can buy it. You can get it for, half the price of retail. Yep. If you're a little bit of a wheeler dealer, you can turn around and sell it, or you can get something that you really wanted at a price that you can't afford. Cash, $500, $1,000 in cash, and it's got to be, your private money. It's a smart thing for a man to do, and you never know if you get into trouble. That money can be a lifesaver. That's advice.
Absolutely. And I won't even call it financial advice. I just call this basic life advice. Having cash around, and Steve, you're saying, suffering and delayed gratification are two, I'm going to pull up an old expression. They're kissing cousins. And here's the funny thing about having cash in the bank. Suffering's a lot less when you have a little bit of cash in the bank. It's not fun, but having a little bit of cash in the bank means you might actually eat that week. Let's say you're going through you can't find a job for a while. It's happened to me. Been there. Have a little bit of cash. You might be able to, if you're not hungry, you'll do better on that interview. Speaking from experience here, folks, have the cash. You cannot
need a
hurt
lot.
anything. No, you don't need a lot.
And you don't need it overnight.
That's correct.
Just take out $50 a week, $20 a week, $100 a week. Doesn't really matter. Build up your personal private nest egg. Do everything else that is prudent, but this is a separate thing. Build up your personal private nest egg.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? If for all you guys who like to eat out fast food, maybe one or two fewer times a month. I know we're big on fitness in this space, so maybe it's not fast food. Maybe it's I know all those protein powders. I know y'all love them, but they're expensive. Maybe not so much. Maybe cut back a little bit on that. Take that $20.
There, you know what? Look at your budget. There's all kinds of ways to save a little bit here, a little bit there. Drop your cable TV. Find a better cell phone plan. Okay, there's all kinds of ways that you can actually save. And I appreciate Aaron Clary. And I could afford a new car, and I could pay $500, $600, $800, $900 a month for a new car. You know what that would do to me? For me? It would transport me from my home to my work.
Yep.
For 10 minutes there, 10 minutes back. Point A to point B. And it really wouldn't make me feel any better than just driving an older car that gets me there and is reliable. I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Well, both of our cars are over 10 years old with no notes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and what a sacrifice that is. Damn.
My life has been better for it, guys, personally. Owning the car free and clear, no notes. In fact, I'm not carrying any debt, personal debt at all right now. I got no debt.
Well, that makes two of us.
It is it is possible, but you're gonna have to delay your gratification. You're gonna have to rethink how you do things. It is gonna take time. It takes patience, fortitude. Uh, these are strong men things. These are things that strong men. These are the basics of being a strong man. If you can't do this, well, OnlyFans is open.
Well, okay, so this whole delayed gratification. Am I less content or less of am I unhappy because I don't buy the latest thing that I want? Not really. I mean, I just adjust my expectations. Would I be more happy and content if I ate out at a fancy place 2 times or any place 2 times a week and drove a nicer car? Would I be happier? Not for me, maybe other people. You got to decide, is it worth it? Does it actually bring you enough joy to make it worth it? Because then, okay, when you're just trying to balance things every month, there's worries there.
Absolutely.
And then that leads to more gambling thinking. Well, I can make the payments for this.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
I can buy something else and I can make the payments to that. And if the shit hits the fan, well, yeah, I'll lose it all, but I'm going to lose it all anyway. So, damn, I can afford this other payment. And you'll never get ahead with that mentality. And are you
Bingo.
actually happier?
Having lived both lifestyles, no, I was not happier when I was doing that. Personally, guys, I'm telling you right now, it isn't worth it. Sorry.
I'll talk for myself. I have made more money than I make now. I have lived in fancier places. I was never extravagant with what I bought, but I live a more modest lifestyle now. And of course, I'm older, so this happens when you get older too. You don't buy as much crap, and you have a different perspective. But honestly, the shit you own, the stuff you buy ends up owning you. You don't own it, it owns you. Because then you got to find a place to put it and what to do with it. The less you have, the less you have to care for. So the less stuff owns you.
Yeah. It's we have to, so you keep buying stuff. Well, you need a bigger house to put it in. Well, that means you need a bigger loan to put it in. Oh, you want that boat to go with your car. Oh, well, now I need a 3-car garage. Got to upgrade the house again. On and on it goes. There is, I get frustrated with the particular prosperity gospel people because they just, it's inane. It's sophomoric. Having more stuff is not going to make your life easier. It's actually going to make your life harder. There are things you could buy that could make your life easier, but also having money in a bank account makes your life easier too. So there's the question of, well, I can either have that or, at some point you're going to have to make some choices there. But just because you're living in a, big house with a big mortgage and, with a nice truck that has a big loan on it, yeah, okay, you might be living that lifestyle that is so popular, particularly in our space that we're in. And I know it seems cliche to say, oh, well, but you're not actually going to enjoy it. It's like, no. I would enjoy having those things, but I wouldn't say that my life has been worse for not having them.
Let me point something else out. A mutual friend of ours, R.P. Thor,
Mm-hmm.
had brain surgery, had a brain tumor, went
Mhm.
into the hospital. There was a fundraising effort for him.
Yep.
And I care about people. When he's not a good friend. I talked to him once on the phone, not even close. But I know he's a man of character, that friends of mine give him great respect. And Plutarch is one of them. He's spent time with R.P. Thor. Well, because of my approach to life, I had a bit of money and I contributed. Because I have that money, that gives my life purpose. And I have the ability to share a little bit, as many others do. That's the Christian thing to do. And
Yep.
I'm not looking for any praise for doing that. And I'm not telling you how much I gave, but the point is, I have the ability to do that. And frankly, I get satisfaction because, hey, it's happened other times. I help out other people when I find it. And I tell them, no, I don't want to be repaid, because that would be corrosive on me. I say, hey, here, I care about you, and use it. And if you can in the future and someone else needs it and you have the ability to pass along the goodwill, hey, pass it along to someone else. And that's a good thing to do when you get your finances in order. It's just a peaceful way to live.
You can have things or you can have friends. It's really hard to have both. And it was, I think for Elena and I, it was far more meaningful to be able to help Thor. And he needed it. Like when we went to visit him, we were actually helping him. He's got to get his house ready for, like he's got to change out. He's got to move stuff around his house. We were literally just moving stuff around his house so that he could get ready for the post surgery. The story with his wife. That's all there on the GoFundMe for him as well. There's a lot of changes that needed to be made to that house. Showed up, went. We were just moving stuff around his house to get ready for that. And of course, then Thor being Thor, and in the streaming world, he wanted to go do a streaming thing with Elena, and they went off and but we were able to put everything together. We were able to go help him. Why? Well, the money was sitting there. We could. That was an option we had. I didn't have to go sell my boat to go raise the cash to help somebody. No, it was just sitting there. And so we did it because we could. That's why we did it.
Well, that kind of brings this whole thing to a closure.
Yeah.
There's all this money that's going to be transferred. And you can worry about how you're going to get your share or how you're going to benefit. Okay, great. But in the end, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? So live your life, be prudent, have some resources, and you know what? If you have the resources, you can share them with others as needed, which will bring you peace and contentment and purpose in your life. But it also allow you to be liquid enough that maybe you can benefit in the future. It's win-win.
Exactly. Well, Stephen, I think you actually just tied it up with a pretty bow for us there.
I try to do that.
We are an hour and a half in, and I think we have covered this topic pretty thoroughly. There was quite a bit of data. There was some speculation in here for you, for everyone out there watching. But yeah, hopefully everyone learned something. What I will say in the future is you're going to hear a word that Stephen said tonight a lot as we go forward, and that word is purpose. Steve and I, we have purpose. We know what we're trying to do, and this is kind of the start of that conversation. Oh, and I would say, if your purpose is gambling, well, not really a purpose at all. So, yeah,
That's a pastime. Gambling is a pastime, not a purpose.
gambling is a pastime, absolutely. So, yeah. Oh boy, see that, Steve?
What?
Down there in the bottom there.
No.
Nick just popped up right as we're finishing up here.
Oh. Okay.
So yeah, so I think we hit on everything we needed to touch for this particular episode here. You kind of wrapped it up there for us. I don't
Well, I tried to. Yeah. I see Nick. Yeah, now I see Nick in there. Wait, let's bring him in.
Boom, there he
Hey,
is.
Nick,
Hey,
we're
guys.
done now.
Yeah, I know.
But you can be part of the stream.
15 minutes. Caught everything but the last 15 minutes. So.
Oh, okay.
My phone connection in like middle of nowhere country in the desert was pretty gracious to me today. So
Okay, well, you have
So
any
is there any
comments?
hope for millennials? My generation? Do I need to
Define
keep
hope.
gambling?
Other than just keep gambling. Yes, there is hope. But it's not hope in the form of prosperity will fall from the sky and land on my lap. The believe it or not, I think the hope is that the crash, the bust, whatever you want to call it, comes, because that is an opportunity to rewrite the rules of the game on all things. So
we're playing the odds. You're hoping the odds change for the millennials.
No,
well,
they're not. Because
no,
when this shit happens, all the rules are
Not if,
rewritten.
but when, right? Yeah.
oh, it's a win.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Right.
And okay, one thing we haven't mentioned, which is near and dear to your heart and the heart of all millennials. Who's gonna Plutarch?
Yeah.
Are men gonna suffer worse in this transition or women?
Oh, that's a different series of charts and a whole different episode. But if you're a woman, sorry, you're fucked. And I mean that figuratively and literally.
God. Oh, you mean they might start putting out again?
They might. No, they've always been putting out. They might
Yes.
actually be forced to be faithful to one man and stick with him.
Oh, and put out for that one man.
And like,
yeah.
And be grateful, right?
Yeah. Because it's that one man, or the streets be calling you thy name.
Oh, you mean like classic, how the world basically generally was run before.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
There's a whole series of streams that I could give on the history of everything that's happened, why we are where we are today. It's not a mystery. It's just, you have to be a nerd like me and read too much. And, I think we're in the company of nerds here. Well, maybe Nick's not a
Oh.
nerd, but
Oh, wait, we're talking about reversion to the mean. But
I'm
exactly what
screwed.
we're talking
Things-
about.
when things revert to the mean, they don't just come back to the mean. They kind of swing back. It's like a pendulum that has to swing back a long ways in the opposite direction before it comes back to the happy middle.
That's correct.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, guys, this might be for an off-topic type stream. I have a whole list of companies that I plan on buying after the bust that are all based on the inimitable Kevin Samuels "Buy a dog, die alone." Like there's a whole industry for this out there that I fully intend on profiting off the misery of women. I really do.
Oh, yeah. I know
Hey.
some 3 products. Should I keep them secret?
For now,
Or 2 products, really?
we'll
I think we already know it.
we
if
will
you're
get
in the
there.
red pill.
Cat food, box wine,
Well, that's one of them. Kitty litter, right?
kitty litter and box
yeah,
wine.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no. There's entire.
variety on kitty litter now these days.
I can name some stocks that people haven't thought of as being lonely single woman plays too. Again, that's really not the purpose of this particular episode, but
Yeah, we
there's a
should
list
probably
out
end it here.
yeah,
I crashed it. I tell the
Nick
caveman
crashed the
crashed
party. All right,
Well, I
well,
was supposed to be on
and-
here with you, but guess what I had to do? Yeah.
work.
Court case this morning. Yeah, and work.
Yeah.
Court case this morning and at work. Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh. I hate it when real life
All the fun
intrudes.
things of an effed up society, right? Hey, it worked
Hey,
out in
at
my
least
favor
you're
this time.
profiting off of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, folks, I think we've covered everything for the day. Nick got to drop in and say hi, so I will go ahead and take us out. See
Okay,
y'all
thanks.
next week.